Hey, my name is Rose, and I am the blog author behind Embracing My Shadow, um, a blog about my journey with accepting my diagnosis of depression and generalized anxiety disorder. And I felt compelled to share on the eve of the day before many bloggers and mental health activists and women just in general talk about what's happened and what's been happening in our news around Miriam Carey. So Miriam Carey was an African American younger adult mother who was recently killed in D.C. after leading police on a chase through the Capitol and ramming through security guards outside of the White House. And she was shot dead. And later was found out that her daughter, her 1-year-old daughter, was in the car. And as the story unfolded, more details were released, and many people have focused on different aspects of the story. So many within the black community have talked about the shooting of a woman, a black woman. In the mental health community, many of our white counterparts have focused more on what was going on with her in terms of why this mother from Connecticut would be in Washington, D.C. with her 1-year-old daughter and put both her and her daughter in danger through seemingly erratic behavior that at the time no one really knew what was going on. And I don't know that we'll ever know what was fully going on with Miriam, but one of the things that emerged after the incident occurred, or after her death, was that she was most likely suffering from some type of mental illness. And so at the request and also just the leadership and example set by a dear friend of mine named Addie, who is an African American woman blogger over at butterflyconfessions.com, I decided to share my story, and I decided to share my journey with mental illness. And I've written about this in different places and spaces, but this particular incident, the death of Miriam Carey, I feel like is calling us, and calling black women in particular, to a different place. So I am not a mother, and honestly don't know if I'll ever be a mother. And one of the things that this has triggered for me is the fact that I don't feel like I am mentally stable enough to care for a child, because on many days it's very difficult to care for myself. And so I've struggled with depression probably for as far back as I can remember, and never really was officially diagnosed until about 2009. And even with that diagnosis, I still was not actively seeking support by way of medication. I was going to therapy sporadically, and was trying to just continually cope with this kind of reality, that this thing that I had always struggled with, and thing that I always felt like was hovering just beneath the surface, actually had a name, and it was called depression. And that, coupled with anxiety and some characteristics of OCD, like, really became clear as I started to take seriously kind of what was going on in my life. And it wasn't until my last major depressive episode in the fall of 2011, that was brought on by a series of external factors, but was exacerbated by my underlying issue of depression, that I truly had to seek ongoing mental, psychiatric and medical assistance. And it was and has continued to be one of the most difficult times in my life. And even as I'm almost 2 years post that last episode, the way that life has played out, I've begun to realize that I'm always going to suffer with this disorder and this illness. And instead of running from it, instead of trying to make excuses for it, I've decided to embrace it. So my depression is marked by a couple of things. Suicidal ideation is something that has occurred often in my mind and in my life, and that's when someone has suicidal thoughts and begins thinking and wondering about what it would be like if they didn't exist. And so that is something that I have definitely struggled with. And in times of increased stress and times of situations that trigger feelings for me of worthlessness or shame, suicidal ideation comes back. I ruminate. So it's one thing to think about something, but it's another thing to obsessively think about something that spirals downward. And so for me, intrusive thoughts that literally are lies, that even as I say it, like knowingly, or I'm logically able to say they're lies, parts of my being believes them to be true. So whether it's things about my worth, whether it's things about my appearance, whether it's things about who cares and who doesn't care about me, those things can literally become dangerous thoughts that then create and perpetuate this cycle of depression, of overwhelming feelings of hopelessness. Today was a bad day. Today was a bad day. And I think, in general, I'm tired of hiding and I'm tired of being something I'm not. And everything that's happened recently with Miriam Carey has solidified for me the importance of having open, honest dialogue and conversation, particularly with women, even more specifically with Black women, about mental health. I always say on my blog at Embracing My Shadow, that we're not alone. And that's a message that I have to continually repeat to myself, because one of the lies that I get told over and over again is that I'm alone and that there is no one that understands, no one that cares, no one that could truly ever love the me that I deal with every day. But I'm starting to realize that to confront these intrusive thoughts and to confront head on the things that would try to take my life from me is something that I have to do actively, and that I have to surround myself with people that care for me, that hold me accountable. I have to be proactive about my mental health, and I have to be in therapy. I have to create a plan for self-care. And it's a matter of life and death. And so I'm not even really sure what more there is to say, except that if you are someone who has struggled with feelings of worthlessness, if you are someone who has struggled to get out of the bed, has struggled to do ordinary tasks, brush your teeth, eat, put on clothes, if you are someone who has lived in places and spaces where a darkness that hovers always seems right beneath the surface, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And that for Miriam, for us, it's important that we get help and we talk about it, that we stand up and that we speak out.